Welcome to Silicon Valley Life. In each episode, you'll get an insider's look at what makes Silicon Valley special, how people pursue ideas, deal with failure, and enjoy life. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, concordiaventures.com. Now, here are the hosts of Silicon Valley Life, Naeem Zafar and Meyyappan.
Hey, welcome everybody. Good to see you again, live and in person. And Meena is traveling, and our guest is here, Elizabeth Funk. Elizabeth, how are you?
Hi, great, thank you. Nice to see you.
Yeah, good to see you again. It's going to be interesting because from all the people I know, Elizabeth probably has one of the most interesting, diverse background. She does crazy things, which only makes sense after she has done them, because while she's doing them. So it'll be good to get to talk to her and learn more from her. And we invite your comments, questions, since we are live, and be able to address them if we can. And it's been an exciting week. It's been super warm all over the country in US, but in Silicon Valley, it's been reasonably good weather. 70s in the daytime, maybe 50s at night. So we are blessed.
Beautiful out here in San Francisco.
Yeah, exactly. Beautiful. Looks great. So Elizabeth, I think we should start by introducing you a little bit. Tell us who you are, maybe even where you grew up, what did you did, what was your career like?
Sure. Well, I grew up in Kansas City. I'm a Midwestern girl by origin, and came out to Stanford undergrad. I drove down Palm Drive with all those palm trees, and it was all over for Kansas for me. I loved being in Palo Alto and Silicon Valley. I studied international relations and economics, which is a career that there's very little specific that is an obvious career path. But Microsoft was just launching Word for Windows and Excel for Windows, and made the obvious correct choice that they should have non-technical people design their apps now that these apps were designed for consumers, because techie people do a really good job of designing things only they can understand. And so I was one of the early product managers at Microsoft, designing the first Windows apps, which led to Microsoft Office. And so I was on the founding team of Office, just kind of by coincidence. So early sort of product design and understanding how technology interacts with our real lives. And so that was kind of the way I got my start.
So before you go further, just did you ever meet Bill Gates or Melinda? Did you hang out, or they were too far away?
I have some fun Bill Gates stories. One was that I was because I was the low person on the totem pole in the Word team. I was responsible for doing the conferences and such. And Bill was supposed to speak, but his assistant was out that day, and so she sent me a note. She said, "Here's your to-do list with Bill. Make sure his fly is zipped. Make sure there's no dandruff on his shoulder. Make sure he's got a watch. He won't have a watch. You have to borrow a man's watch." I thought, good heavens, but brilliant man.
Yeah. So you just spent time. And then what did you do after Yahoo, after Microsoft?
Well, I went to business school at Harvard, and when I was graduating, I had the idea that I wanted to get back to Silicon Valley. I loved the idea of the tech, and I hadn't been in Silicon Valley. I'd kind of been an outsider with Microsoft being up in Redmond, Washington. And so I thought I wanted to get into venture capital. So I was in San Francisco and the Bay Area interviewing with VC firms. And an old friend from my Microsoft days, ironically, he'd been at Lotus, our competitor. He was the product manager for Lotus Omni Pro, if you know there was such a thing in word processor. And because Microsoft Word had like 2% market share, we were both competing against the giant, which was WordPerfect. And he had gone to this little company called Yahoo, and he said, "You got to come check it out." And so I stopped in to meet them, and literally on the spot ended up with a job offer. But they said, if you're going to take it, you have to start Monday. I kind of laughed. I said, "Well, it's October and I don't graduate till June, so that's obviously not going to work." And they looked at me like, "Well, what does that have to do with anything?" So I actually flew back and forth 3 nights here, 4 nights there, red eyes in between, and started at Yahoo, where we actually went public before I'd even graduated from business school. So that was a very fun early days of the internet, making it up and trying to, we laugh now about, we didn't know how the internet was going to be used and what it was going to do. So it was a lot of guesswork, and some of them we guessed right. A lot of them we didn't.
So I remember you telling me once you had something to do with Yahoo Shopping too.
Yes. Yes. I was the crazy woman who said, wouldn't it be cool if you could shop online? The guys were like, no, who wants to shop? The internet's for stock quotes and sports scores and pornography, fun stuff, sumo wrestling. And I remember saying, shopping for shoes is a little bit like pornography for women. We don't actually have to buy them. We actually enjoyed the shopping experience. The guys looked at me like, I no idea what you're talking about. So I decided I was right. And I went out and bought HTML for Dummies from the local bookstore. And I wrote Yahoo Shopping myself, which got me in a lot of trouble. And it was upside down and backwards on the browser because I had no idea how to program. But I kind of wanted to prove the point. And with all due respect, I kind of turned out to be right.
Right. And then I know you had a run-in with Sergey and from Google folks also at some time in Yahoo, didn't you?
Well, that's you spoil the punchline, which is that I was the business development person. I did the M&A and I did, or helped with, and I did the business development partnerships. And one of my partnership responsibilities was to figure out who we were going to license search from every year. And the Google, on the Yahoo page, there's a search bar and you just license it to whoever, was the least expensive. And an old friend of mine walked in and said, search is just a technology. It can't stand on its own. And these guys have got a search tech that we would sell to you. We'd sell it to you for $10 million. And I remember throwing him out saying, why would I pay $10 million for search, Ron? You're crazy. I'm not paying for that. And so they went on their merry way and became Google. And I saw Ron years later on a yacht bigger than the bay. And he said, honey, come here. You got to meet Elizabeth. She's the reason we're rich. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, that's Silicon Valley life. You never know who is going to grow up to be a huge company. You have no idea.
You really don't. It's part of it, which is that there are seasons and there are times for companies to come and go. And, and I actually think that in some ways it's not healthy for the same company to be a market leader for decades and decades. And what Yahoo brought to the world was in its prime when it was in its prime. And, there are different things for different reasons, but no, Yahoo's not what it was back then, but back then it was so fun. We were really making it up. And I was sleeping under my desk more nights than I was driving home because the thing was different than software. In software, you had a feature idea and it took 18 months before the software was re-updated, especially back then when we printed on CDs. But with internet, you put something up and you go take a coffee break and you come back and see if it's working. And that was just so exciting. It was adrenaline. There are lots of things we made up back then. Some of them you would laugh and some of them were pretty cool.
So most people, after being part of the early part of Yahoo, going public, would have retired, but not you. What's wrong with you? Tell us more.
Oh my gosh. Well, I left when it got too big for me. It was, I started when it was sort of 10 or 20 people. And I remember the day that we were doing, or the week we were doing the annual business reviews. And we had to sit through half-day sessions where we did head count and forecasting for each business unit. And I was about 8 business units. And I walked out one day and I looked at Jerry and I said, I'm not quitting today, but this will be my last annual business review. Like, I don't do big bureaucracy. It was kind of a wake-up moment. And so I left thinking I was going to start go join another early stage VC-backed, company. But at the time I was dating somebody who was running a public company into the ground. So I stepped in and helped with that public company and actually ended up selling it and shutting it down. But I'd also told myself I was going to spend some time on philanthropy. I'd had some wealth come in from my Yahoo experience and going public. And so I got excited about the idea of microfinance. And I really thought I was just going to be a donor and, support a specific cause. But the more I started learning about it, I ended up getting sucked in and ended up spending another 10 years of my life on that and never got back to Silicon Valley tech.
So what did you accomplish in microfinance? Who did you help? And tell us some stories.
So, when I started looking at microfinance, the biggest, player was Mohammed Yunus and Grameen Bank. And so I literally sent them an unsolicited check, $5,000, and said, I like what you do. And didn't really expect anything. And I got a phone call and they invited me to join them at a conference. And one thing led to another, and he asked me if I would consider joining their board. And so I attended a board meeting as an observer. And as I looked through the documents that I'd been provided, I had this aha moment. I said, wait a minute, they're profitable. Why are they a nonprofit? In fact, it almost felt hypocritical. And so I raised the question at the board meeting, and Mohammed just yelled at me in front of the whole board. He said, it's unethical to make money while doing good. And I thought about it. And then Steve Rockefeller pulled me aside at the break. He said, it's not about the ethics. It's just not possible. But the more I looked at it, and the bigger banks had economies of scale and could charge a lower interest rate, I could help more people and charge them a lower interest rate if I could get a bunch more zeros behind the numbers that were in the system. So I went up and started the Dignity Fund, which is $10 million, friends and family, before the days of impact investing was even a term. And we put debt, not equity, into the microfinance organizations so that we didn't have a perverse incentive to charge the highest interest rate. We were with 14 microfinance organizations in 12 countries, India, Philippines. And those organizations grew from 5,000 borrowers to $50,000 borrowers to 1 million borrowers, because we were able to harness capitalism instead of philanthropy and grants. And so I really got smitten with what has now become impact investing. And I believe that for the world's problems to get solved, we need the scale that capitalism, harnessing greed. Greed is a powerful force, whether you like it or not, and self-interest. And if people can make money solving the world's problems, they'll get solved.
So just to understand, make sure we're on the same page, my understanding of microfinance is that you're giving small loans, maybe $100 to $200, to people which are more community-based lending. So they have to save face. The community approves the loan. So if somebody doesn't pay, that person looks bad. Is that the idea?
Well, we'd like to say it in a more positive way, which is that, there's a huge percent, thankfully a declining percent, of people in this world who are living extreme poverty, which is defined as less than $1 a day in income. And those folks don't have collateral. They will work all day to make 50 cents, 75 cents. There's no way they're going to be able to save to buy a sewing machine or a cow. It's beyond their capabilities. One of the women that I met, which was really life-changing to me, was a mother who had 3 children. And she had a cow and made milk, and she never made enough and sold enough to be able to feed all of her children. And every night she'd have to look in the eye of one of them and say, sorry, honey, not tonight. And it chokes me up still to think about it. And she said, I was too much for me. And I decided I would save a penny a day to buy poison so that we could all die together. I was just going to put us out of our misery. And right about that time, she got connected to a microfinance organization that lent her $400. And with that money, she bought a thermometer that would allow her to pasteurize the milk into cheese. And by the time I met her, her kids were biking around selling cheese to the next villages. That $400 saved her life. And it was just this transformational moment for me where it wasn't a gift. She could pay it back. Cheese is profitable. She just couldn't buy that thermometer. And so it's also, you think about the most powerful forces in life, greed being one of them, and there's a nicer word for greed, but also, the entrepreneurial spirit. I mean, if you all that, worth $1 million, powerful forces, and work with them, and helping these entrepreneurs build their own way out of poverty, there's pride in that. There's determination in that doesn't come if you gave them a gift.
Yeah, no, that's really powerful. So jumping forward, what are you doing now? Because I know you're on a mission again.
Yes. And ironically, after you spent now 18 years of my life preaching that if the world's problems are really going to get solved, it's got to be with the capitalist system. And so then I went and started a nonprofit. And people think, oh my God, she's off the deep end. Who are you? And what did you do with Elizabeth? But I have, and I've learned something more about myself along the way, which is that it's less about the specific cause. It's when I get itchy when I see an answer that I feel like is so obvious that people aren't seeing it, or the system isn't seeing it, which is just like bringing for-profit capital into microfinance. And today, the vast majority of money in microfinance industry is for-profit, and it is largely eradicated what the UN calls extreme poverty. And yeah, people made a buck in the meantime as a byproduct. Great. That means more of it happens. And in this case, the thing that was itching me was homelessness. And it just is a head scratcher to me that in today's day and age, like how, why? And so a group of us started looking at it, and it just the obvious missing links became so obvious that I just thought to myself at one point, I'm just going to have to do this. I mean, it's just going to kill me. It could have been puppies. It could have been global warming. I don't know, but it just is something about me that needs to solve something that I feel like can be solved. So it's, yes. So I've started a nonprofit called DignityMoves that is working to eradicate unsheltered homelessness.
Well, that sounds very timely and a huge problem, and it's a complex problem. And because there's politics involved, there's city and governments involved, there's a people who don't want to be housed. Educate us. What did you approach, and what have you accomplished?
Well, first of all, I think my biggest takeaway from all of this is it's only complicated if we let it be complicated. I mean, we have sent men to the moon. We've decoded the human genome. I'm talking to you from miles away. 4 walls and a roof? Seriously? It isn't complicated. I mean, you've got to stop and think about it, right? There's not rocket science. And we're making it complicated. And I also believe that once you identify a problem and can name it, that's 90% of solving it. And so looking at the system from a naive, take a step back and look at the big picture, there are a couple of things that jumped out at me. First, we're about unsheltered homelessness. When people are in shelters, they are sheltered and you don't see them. But when people are on the streets and they move into a shelter or temporary place, they're still classified as homeless. And so a city that is scored on reducing their homeless count would rather get one person into a permanent apartment for the same amount of money that could have gotten 50 people into an interim place because their homeless count doesn't go down. Well, right there, the metrics are wrong. I've named it and it's easy to fix, right? You change your metrics. And so there are other reasons that unsheltered homelessness has been allowed to persist. The other one is funding. Because when people get to permanent housing, they get a Section 8 voucher and they get help paying for it. But when you come off the streets into interim housing or shelter, there's no funding for you. Cities have to scrape that together and they've been told to spend all their money on permanent housing. And so we obviously end up with a disconnected system that's pretty easy to solve if you identify that. Right now, our problem is for every one person who gets into that permanent apartment, 4 are becoming homeless. So we're looking pretty existential crisis right about now. And there's got to be a change. And so what we are doing is saying, let's create a new thing. Not shelter. Shelter doesn't work. People don't want it. And it doesn't work mindset-wise. But not permanent housing. What if we built something in between that we could do ridiculously fast, ridiculously cost-effectively, and at scale? And we can do that because it's not intended to be forever, but it's a right now and all in. And so we build little tiny cabin communities. We set them up on vacant parking lots. So we don't have land costs. We borrow land, use emergency building codes. And we're doing these all over the California. But I think the most important twist, even since you and I have talked, is that the biggest thing standing in our way is people don't believe there's an end point. So we're now going community and community and saying, here's the end point. Here is the point based on law and math at which you have ended this problem in your city forever. Let's now start working backwards. And I don't think people understand that there is a number that is not far, is not as big as they think, and nobody's ever bothered. And so we are now working on legal precedents and all the rest and saying, let's end it in your community once and for all.
So I want to dig in some of the numbers from you, but just to be we have live audience. Please feel free to ask questions, comments. We'll be able to ask Elizabeth those questions.
Sure.
So number 2 is, I mean, you're talking about tiny homes, which you can take a church parking lot and put like 40, 20 tiny homes with a kitchen, with a community computer room.
Community kitchen, community dining, and not in each home.
But this is like what's the size, like 8 feet by 4 feet or something?
Yeah, it depends on we don't make the units, we buy them from different manufacturers. So you can get all shapes and sizes, but 64 square feet is a good one for a single person, 85 square feet or 100 for a couple. It really depends. And some of them can have bathrooms, although when people are coming right in off the streets, it's not a great idea for them to be able to have their own bathroom. I mean, I think back to my Stanford days, I didn't have a bathroom in my room, and that was a feature, not a bug, right? They want to have community.
So just to understand, so your model is that, look, if a city wants to solve homeless problem, you can set up this tiny homes in a week. And
not quite that fast, but yeah.
Throw some numbers at us, like what is the cost and how does it end so people have appreciated that this is a workable, working system.
So in San Francisco, we built our first site. It's on Gough Street at Market. And the cost to build it was $2.2 million. It's got 70 rooms, 90 people sleeping there. So that works out to about $32,000 per room, as opposed to $800,000 or $900,000 per room for permanent housing. And it took 2 or 3 months to build. So really fast and really cost effectively. And, that is, those units will last for 10 years. You're talking about a very, very low cost of capital. They're relocatable. So when the landowner, in this case, a private developer, is ready to break ground and pick them up, forklift, and move them to the next place, which also means you can dial up and dial down your capacity as needed. And so, so they're $32,000 a thing. The cost to operate them is a lot more because we want to do supportive services and case management and all that. But even those costs can be, they're Medi-Cal and Cal-AIM reimburses for a lot of that. You just have to get creative, and cities aren't that great being creative usually. They're stretched thin and they haven't thought about it. And so coming in and helping them figure out how those funding sources can be used and just flat out decide to do it. Santa Barbara County, once we did our first one, we built one right downtown in Santa Barbara, next door to Morgan Stanley, private client services. I mean, talk about center, right? But it was really well received because we spend money to do a beautiful exterior and all that. And one of the supervisors took me to lunch. She said, I want you to do one in my district up north. And I blurted out, I said, no, Greg, why don't we do this one at a time? We're not chip away at 30 rooms at a time. Let's do the whole county. What's it going to take to end it countywide? Well, it's 400 rooms, $19 million. We've raised $16 million of it from private capital. And philanthropy is willing to come in. If you tell them we mean it, we will have a finish line. And quite frankly, the corollary of that is, and we will enforce our anti-camping laws. Yeah. People should not have to resort to, nor should they be allowed to suffer on our streets. And so that's the right thing for a community to do.
No, this is pretty amazing that this is what I mean is that entrepreneurship is not about starting a new company. It's about thinking differently about the problems which we see. Entrepreneurs look at solution, and you're a true entrepreneur.
Yes. And it is. And letting go of like, well, this is how it's done. Right. Yeah. I mean, we just started with, why can't we get people indoors? Land is expensive. Great. We'll borrow it. Building codes are onerous. Well, there's emergency codes that FEMA uses. How do they do it? Let's borrow that. Right. People don't want a shelter in their neighborhood. Okay. What would they want? Let's invite only the people in the immediate area to come into it. Then that neighborhood's thrilled. The next neighborhood's going to call and beg. Give me another hurdle. It's not no, it's how. Yeah. And if it's breaking rules, break the rules.
That I think that's a key phrase. I'm going to reuse it. It's not. It's not. What did you say? It's not. It's how.
It's not no. It's how. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And the metrics don't score you, and you don't get it. Who cares? This is a crisis.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's kind of. I always say, if you witness a car accident and the person's bleeding on the side of the road, you go up there and you take off your dirty shirt and you bandage it, and you don't care that the shirt's not sanitized, and you don't care that it's not zoned for, pull out. You got to save their life. And then you can get them to the hospital where you do what really saves their life, is the surgery. Yeah. And these are emergency cabins, and darn right you're going to get people indoors. Let's quit thinking about it.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. So I think this is what I want my audience to feel, that entrepreneurship is not about starting Google every day and whatnot. It's about solving problems.
Yes.
I mean, Uber is there to solve a problem. Airbnb is there to solve a problem. What's the problem? And then you'll find the right business model to fit the problem.
And the other thing I would say, though, is you get a lot of starry-eyed entrepreneurs who have something really cool that we call a tool in search of a need. And that's the other problem. I'm not a tiny home manufacturer who's trying to figure out why somebody would need it. It was the other way around, right? Which is, how are we going to get people indoors? And just always hold yourself, thinking about that when you're being an entrepreneur. You start with a need and then figure out what's going to solve it.
So where is Elizabeth going now?
Well, I'm pretty hooked on DignityMoves for a while, I have to say. We will, one of the things we're working on is merging full circle my nonprofit work with my 20 years of the impact investing. And, when we first started DignityMoves, there was no way I could have done this as with an investment model, because all of the ecosystem was fiercely opposed to what we were doing in terms of models and funding. But now that this has been proven, I am working on finding a way where investors could invest to build them. And then there would be, the revenue sources of various kinds that could, reimburse or pay back. Because we're to the point where, just like I can say in Santa Barbara County, let's start with ending it and work backwards. There's no excuse for unsheltered homelessness in the United States of America. There's just no excuse. And we can't do it ourselves. We'll empower other communities, but gosh darn it, it's got to be eradicated.
So my hope is that there'll be 100 new Elizabeth who will discover this, and this will be a phenomena which will spread across.
That's our goal. We're literally writing an open source playbook and trying to find ways to get people replicating this in their communities, because it just takes determination, but it's not as hard as you'd think. Getting people indoors is actually really easy if we take away all of our, preconceptions and biases and funding bureaucracy and just do it.
So let me switch gears for a second and see, what does Elizabeth do for fun? What is your life like? Give us some suggestion that only local people would know.
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, I have to admit, I spent, unfortunately, too many of my years mostly focused on being embroiled in a horrible divorce and a lot of negative energy. Every morning I'd wake up and there'd be more negativity on my screen. And so now waking up every morning and like building our way out of a horrible humanitarian crisis, it's kind of terrible to say this is my pleasure. I mean, there's nothing I enjoy more than making progress on this. And because it's just seeing it is really coming real. But outside of that, I have 2 young children, not so young children now. One is a sophomore going to junior year at USC in mechanical engineering. My daughter is going to be a freshman at Vanderbilt. And so I'm a single mom, now an empty nester. So they had been my major diversion of my attention. And now that they're both gone, we'll see. But I'm not anything more than anyone else. I love to ski and I grew up an ice skater.
So you live in San Francisco proper?
I am. I'm in Pacific Heights. Yes, I've always been in the city. I used to drive down to Yahoo, hour and a half each way. And people would say, how could you do that commute? And the truth is, it was my favorite hour and a half of the day. I just go into my zone and do all that thinking. And in some ways, I kind of miss it. But I've always been in the city.
So you recommend any beach, a restaurant, a coffee shop, any other places which you recommend when you have visitors coming from out of town?
Oh my goodness. Well, in San Francisco, I'm right next to Fillmore Street. So I love going up and down Fillmore, everything from Florio, and there's great ice cream places. They all kind of, spring up just a block away. So favorite restaurants. I mean, I still love Boulevard and some of the ones over on the water, but I'm a traditionalist. I always love the same old Taddich Grill and all my favorites. There's not a beach I necessarily recommend, not San Francisco. My favorite beach is get on an airplane. But
So when you go on vacation, where do you head up typically? What was the last couple of interesting vacations?
Oh, so I have a funny thing. When I separated from my husband many years ago, over a decade, I dropped my airport for the first time, partying to the home, and I called my best gay buddy, and he said, Elizabeth, we're not gonna do this again. And next year, when you drop your kids off, you're at the airport getting on the next flight to me. And we've done it for 10 years in a row. It's been a tradition. We've done Greece, we've done Beirut, we've done Italy. Anyway, so this year it's the opposite, which is my daughter's away on her senior trip in Europe, and I'm going over to pick her up in Croatia. We're going to meet in Croatia and do a week along the Dalmatian coast and the islands. I'm a water person. Being on the water in a boat is just absolute heaven for me.
No, I think Croatia, you like it. I found the water to be the best water temperature in Dubrovnik. As you can take a little boat, so you love the food and the temperature of the water. Good place to go.
I'm looking forward to it. Forward to it.
Yeah, excellent. So, any other advice for entrepreneurs, or any other advice and tips of life, not just about entrepreneurship, but living?
Because I've got 2 kids going into college or in college and declaring majors and all that. The one that's on my mind right now is the idea that at age 18, you're supposed to pick what you're going to be for the rest of your life. I think it should be illegal. I think, and by the way, for young people whose lifespan and life expectancy is going to be so much longer than the rest of us, what you are going to be is 5 things. You are not going to be a business person. You're not going to be in the, nonprofit industry. Hopefully you'll be like me, where you're doing 5 or 6 different careers. And so my advice is start with that assumption. How can I create a portfolio of skills and a portfolio of interests and knowledge, and don't stay in any one thing too long. You get stale.
No, that's a very good advice, because the most creative and interesting people are who have multiple disciplines and they're able to connect the dots. When you connect the dot, innovation happens, but you don't have enough dots to connect. So
exactly.
you can't make a bunny by connecting the dot if there's only 3 dots.
And seeing the perceptions, and especially now with AI and all the rest, knowledge is not going to be a differentiator. The differentiator, competitive differentiator, is going to be negotiation skills and persuasion skills and 3-dimensional strategic thinking that can practice your chess. I really think that kind of thinking is going to be what it's going to take. My son is dyslexic, and dyslexics have a propensity to sort of see things 3-dimensional conceptually. And I think that's a big gift. Anybody out there who's dyslexic, you're going to thrive in this new AI world where it's not about reading and writing skills. It's about seeing things from multiple angles.
No, that's a great perspective. Actually, maybe you can drill down a little bit more about how's AI going to impact from your vantage point in your business or society broadly, because everybody's wondering and everybody has an opinion. How do you see it?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, from a student perspective, it's no longer going to be, memorizing facts. It's going to be seeing patterns and understanding things. And I think it's going to be more about, in my case, I do a lot of writing, write op-eds and so forth. And I can tell it, give an opinion about X, Y, and Z. And it'll spit something out that's beautifully written and doesn't have any insight. And so really where the differentiator, I think, is going to be is the one core thing humans still can do is see something that's not obvious, and the thinking out of the box, and like you said, the entrepreneurial type things. And so I think that AI is going to be it's going to be very helpful and very powerful in bringing us up from the more mundane and challenging us to think the next step and think multiple dimensions. And I hope that lots of guardrails and concerns and all the rest. But I think on the balance, I think that human beings are going to take it in a positive direction, and it's going to be constructive.
Are you using any particular AI tool yourself today or not yet?
Oh, I mean, I do. Like I said, with writing, I use ChatGPT to help me through and Perplexity, and actually, I'm trying to get, if somebody has an advice and knows better than I do, because I'm trying to do a lot of sort of looking into like the academic reports and the documents that the governments post, and say things like, when people first become homeless, what % already have a mental health issue? And then once they've been on the streets for 5 years, what %? I know that data is out there, but searching through reports and so forth, I'm still looking for my favorite AI tool of academic type research, but I'm playing with a lot of them.
Yeah, actually, I use ChatGPT for some of the research also, but also for like interviewing a new product idea, because ChatGPT or other AI tools is a collective wisdom of hundreds of people. So you can interview them like you're interviewing a prospect, a customer. Other thing that I'm enjoying is Pi. Pi is vocal, a bot, but it talks to me, remembers me, and it's made by what is that company? Inflection AI.
Okay.
So it's really very, very interesting, very powerful.
I do like to do voice dialogue and conversational, because as I mentioned to you, I had an eye surgery recently, and screens aren't really my friend, and typing is a little harder. So Pi, I'll try that.
Yeah, PI, just Pi from Inflection AI is very powerful. I'm loving it.
Okay.
So let's see if I have a feeling she will become my best friend and confidant pretty soon.
Yes, that I love, when they learn from you. There's nothing more frustrating than starting fresh. I wanted to, know what DignityMoves is about and know what my position is, and also my tone, because, I think it's important to have a pretty disruptive attitude about this. And without being, demeaning to the past. I'm pretty much about, let's, gosh darn it, end this problem and no more of this sitting around and, talking about it. So there's an ambitious tone that I need my AIs to adapt for me to.
So the last question I'm going to ask you, and maybe I'll reflect on my own, is anything you saw in the last few days which surprised you? And while you're maybe thinking about which one could it be, for me, I just got a new Tesla last week because the previous one crashed by another Tesla.
Okay.
So, too many Teslas. So I got a new one, but the new one is Model 3. I got the performance version, high speed, loving it. Of course, I almost can't drive another car without full FSD, full self-driving. I'm so reliant on that. It takes so much stress away from getting to place A to place B. So loving the new Tesla. So what about you?
Okay, that's
Anything which
good.
surprised you?
And is the full self-driving working well?
Yeah, I've been using it. I've been using it the day it came out. So I love it. It's gotten the release 12, which came out a few months ago. It was like leaps and bounds better. Now,
All
it's
right.
not about following the lines on the highway. It knows all the unpaved road. It brings you. It acts like you would drive. So
Oh, you
it's
sold
really good.
me. Because I had a Tesla that drowned literally a year and a half ago when there were heavy rains, and my garage is the only subterranean garage in the block in Pacific Heights with the hills. And all the water came down and flooded my garage, and we had 3 feet 11 inches of water across my whole basement. And I had my Tesla, as well as my daughter's electric vehicle in the garage, connected to high voltage. So we had to get them, cherry picked, to disconnect the house and get them towed away, completely drowned. And I decided I want to try something different because I'm an Enneagram 7. I always want to try new things and be adventurous. So I tried the BMW i4, and it's just not the same. I have just been not as pleased. So I've been kind of thinking about going back to Tesla. So you've inspired me. I think I will.
The new Model 3 is called Highland. It just came out a few months ago.
Okay.
Extremely good. Double pane windows, so quiet. Yeah.
Highland, thank you for the tip. Now, see, you're doing me favors. My biggest surprise in the last couple of days, and it shouldn't be a surprise, but the city of San Jose has been so on board with what we're talking about really just darn ending this problem. And I have just continued to be shocked and amazed at how that city council and the mayor and everyone is being sincere, and actually we're doing it, and we are truly going to do it, and district by district. And San Jose is going to be the shining example of the nation, and I just get goosebumps being a part of it. So that's my highlight of the last couple of days.
Well, I'm so happy to hear. Someday maybe they'll elect similar people in San Francisco. Who knows?
God help me.
So good.
I'm working it. I'm helping. Yeah. I'm trying.
I know. Well, Elizabeth, as always, pleasure to talk to you, see you, get your insights. So many nuggets here. We'll unpack it slowly. Thanks for being on the show.
It is always my pleasure. And I've just really enjoyed getting to know you and be invited to do these things. And I'm inspired by what you are doing for our next generation of entrepreneurs. And I'm happy to be a part of it however I can.
Actually, one last plug. How did Elizabeth and I meet? You wonder. Do you want to tell them how we met?
It was the online thing, lunch club.
Yeah, about 3 years ago, we were paired randomly for a 45-minute conversation, did not know anybody at all, and we have become friends. She has spoken at my class several times at Berkeley, and I love her.
Yes, I've enjoyed it, and I have to admit, I've become so busy with DignityMoves that I've not been doing lunch club recently, but I should. Yes, it was the biggest gift that it gave me was friendship with you, so thank you.
Well, we did get a question from Ludwig at the very last second.
How do I think it will affect the traditional hiring process? I hope it's going to really be take it to a whole new level. I would hope. I'm doing a fair bit of hiring, and I have to say that resumes, like, there's got to be a better way to really understand who the person is and to really filter for what I'm looking for skills wise. And the skills, most of the hiring, it's not about what you have learned in terms of formulas and strategies. It's about a personal fit, and you can't get that in the in reading a resume. So I'm hoping it will be really intelligent in terms of filtering and, quite frankly, bringing people to the top that wouldn't have normally passed a manual human-led screening process.
Exactly. I think it's going to be finding better culture match, because in hiring, I care about two things: the motivation and culture fit. And if
Yes.
AI can help me filter out, I think that's a huge step forward. So I really think it's going to play a huge role. AI will play a huge role in
I think
hiring.
so
And then,
too. I'll tell you a quick story, which is that, real estate developers and construction folks are by definition not interested in taking risk, right? They chose a career that is dotting every I and crossing every T. And we're trying to rethink how you do construction, right? I mean, we're doing no foundations and trying to be innovative. So trying to find somebody who's an innovative thinker, but yet has construction industry experience. And thank goodness I asked one guy once, I said, so we're trying to figure out how to do bathrooms above ground without having to trench underground utilities. How would you think about doing that? And he said, oh my God, I wouldn't think about it. I wouldn't be able to sleep at night. I would be so scared, so worried about it. I'm like, thank you for your time. Bye. And so filtering for, he had a lot of great experience, but the personality risk profiles and open-mindedness, they'll say they have it, but there's a better way to get to the real answer of the fit.
Well, great, Elizabeth. I look forward to seeing you again. And to our audience, have a great week. Talk to you soon.
Nice to see you. Thank you for having me. Nice to see you soon.
You've been tuning into Silicon Valley Life with your hosts, Naeem Zafar and Meena Meyyappan. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, concordiaventures.com. Thank you for your positive feedback, comments, questions, and for sharing this show with others.